Last night on CNN, a Donald Trump surrogate tried to explain to Van Jones that, yes, fine, the KKK is a terrorist organization, which is nice of him to admit. It would be great for Donald Trump to do that. They are a terrorist organization, but that's okay because they were a liberal terrorist organization. And thankfully, Van Jones had a good response to it.
When he is playing funny with the Klan, that is not cool.
He didn't play funny with the
Hold on a second. I know this man when he gets passionate about terrorism. I know how he talks about terrorism. The Klan is a terrorist organization that has killed...
A leftist terrorist organization.
You can put whatever label you want. That's your game to play.
No, that's your game to play.
No, they're not. We're not going to play that game.
No,
we're not going to play that game.
We are going to understand history.
No. And it's wrong to do in America.
It is wrong to understand that these are not leftists. They were...
What difference does it make if you call them leftists?
It makes a lot of difference, Van.
Call them chipmunks. They kill people. And you don't play games with that.
You're right. And you don't hide and say that's not part of the base of the Democratic Party. That has been... They were the military arm, the terrorist arm of the Democratic Party, according to historians. For God's sakes, read your history.
The Klan divided people by race.
You have to divide by race.
The Klan killed people by race, and he had the opportunity, and he didn't do it tonight.
They did it to further the progressive agenda.
Why do you... Listen, that is, first of all, so
true.
Hello?
Okay, let's break this down. First of all, if the Klan are leftists, which is the funniest thing I've ever heard, then why is Donald Trump supporting them? This guy supports Donald Trump, obviously, right? And he even wrote a book about how great Donald Trump is. Okay, so then why are you proud of supporting a guy who supports leftists? Okay, so let's leave that alone for a second and go to the idea, the core thing about what he's pinning it on is the Klan, a lot of them used to be in the Democratic Party in the South. That is true. Decades and decades and decades ago.
100 years ago.
And the reason that they switched over to the Republican Party is because the Republican Party ran a very well-known strategy, which they now admit, and in fact have apologized for, called a Southern strategy, where their strategy was, let's get all those Dixiecrats who are Democrats but deeply racist in the South, and let's win over the racist vote to the Republican Party. They did that through Richard Nixon, and Pat Buchanan even told me on MSNBC, we're on a joint appearance, that they did do that, and he said, hey, we had a good run doing that, okay? So this guy, it's not like he's unaware that, that the Republican Party purposely courted the former Klansmen and racists and successfully courted them over to the Republican Party, and hence that's why they're voting for Donald Trump, who flirts with the Klan. He just says that in order to trick people into thinking that the Klan is progressive, which is beyond preposterous. Could you imagine the Klan's like, we're for progress and equality, so let's make sure we burn people who are different than us. That's the exact opposite of being a progressive.
Get out of our town. Now let's go watch Will and Grace. No, they're not doing that. It's ridiculous. It's like, I assume that he is smart enough to understand that you have party identification. That's a thing that you have. You have political ideology. That's a thing that you have. And they can be connected in one way in a particular time geographic context. And then if you go to a different time geographic context, they don't mean the same thing. They call the parties in the Congo and North Korea democratic. That doesn't make them democratic. Back in the day, right now, if you're a Democrat, you're probably a liberal. If you're a liberal, you're probably a Democrat. That's a result of political polarization combined with a political realignment. Both of those things have changed. Back in the day, it was flipped in terms of conservatives and liberals being the predominant arms of those parties, and you also had more variability ideologically in the parties. There were liberal and conservative Republicans. There were liberal and conservative Democrats. That has changed, and it's also changed in terms of who you're likely to identify with. They were conservative. I don't give a fuck if they were Republicans or Whigs. I don't care what party they were part of. They were racist conservatives. They were then, and they're supporters now. And bear in mind, there are KKK chapters in more than 30 states in America operating literally as we're doing this show. They are racist conservatives, the same way they and their fathers and their grandfathers were. And I speak about grandfathers and fathers because you should look into Trump's family background.
I want people to understand, we're not saying all leftists are wonderful and all people on the right are horrible. No, for example, if you wanted to pick people who've done terrible things on the left, you can. You could say, okay, look at Castro and his subjugation of the Cuban people as a current example. But you could look at Mao. Oh my God, the number of people that Mao killed, and he was a leftist, right? Now, I know he's a dictator.
Again, it's the we conflate economic like progressivism or liberalism with social. Like, there are people who had sort of liberal economic philosophies that were not all about social progress.
So now the reason I say that is, so John, you're right, but so Mao and Stalin started on the left end of the spectrum, meaning everybody should be equal, and yada yada, right? And rip down the inequality of the system. Now, what they turned into was dictators, and dictators, by the very nature of being a dictator, protects power, right?
Yeah.
Which then makes you on the right side of the spectrum. But it's fair to say they started on the left side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting conversation to have. It is not an interesting conversation to have, which a lot of Republicans are now doing as a rhetorical trick, like this guy did. Hitler was a leftist. That's just not remotely true. He started on the right, and he ended up on the insane right.
It's not even true to the extent that the KKK were Democrats. It's not even stupidly true.
That's right, because the Democrats back then in the South were the conservative party. They were the conservative party, right? So now, what does it mean to be on the right or left? Let's just break it down one more step here. Right is we're going to protect tradition, culture, the way things are done. We're not really that in favor of change. The left is we need to make progress. That's why they're progressives. So we need to expand the circle of liberty. So in the South, for example, the right wing said, no, rights should be for white people because that's how we've been doing it for 100 years. That's our tradition. That's our culture. That's our history.
Yeah.
And to them, that is something that was a moral thing to protect, right? Tradition. Now, the progressives said, no, we've got to progress beyond that and expand rights for African Americans. And eventually there was conversations about it, and at different times expanding rights for women, gay people, etc. Progressives, people on the left end of the spectrum, are in favor of that, right? People on the right end of the spectrum hate that. Now, which side do you think the Klan was on? Do you think they were on the side of expanding rights for women, gays, blacks, etc.? Or were they on the side of, no, let's protect our tradition of whites only having power? Come on, this is not an interesting conversation if you have any intelligence or any sense of history. But the reason he does it is because they gain from this conversation where they throw a curveball. Now, in TV, they don't have time to explain it like we just did to you, right? Yeah. So in that 38 seconds they have to fight, you can't get into all this. So all he needs to do is throw a curveball and confuse the audience. Yeah. Well, KKK were Democrats, they're leftists. Wait a minute, we're not even talking about Trump now.
That's not what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, the whole point is, well, Jesus Christ, why is Donald Trump giving a wink and a nod to the Klan and say he might not be against them? And instead of having that conversation about what, and it doesn't matter what you call the Klan, that's what Van Jones was trying to say. Trump is in favor of the Klan, which is deeply racist right now, today.
Yeah.
But he throws the curveball and everybody else is having a different conversation. And in a sense, it's a win for him because he took the attention away from Donald Trump.
And even Van Jones, who was doing the right thing, he was making the case, and he eventually circles back around to, like, you're distorting history. When the guy starts saying it's a leftist party, he's trying to make his point, and he has 15 seconds to do it. He says, okay, that's your game to play. He doesn't even have time to just say, no, they're not leftists. They're not stop saying they're leftists. He eventually gets back in that general area.
So I want to say one last thing about that, which is that, so it's too much to ask Van Jones to correct every insane thing this guy says in the middle of a short debate like that. It is incumbent upon CNN to put on people on TV that have some attachment to reality. Like, I get it, you need Trump people, you need Republicans. I'm not saying no, let's not have any of those guys on. And I get it, you might have him on as a guest every once in a while. But they have him on as a pundit.
That guy should never, ever be just a political analyst again.
Right.
How could he? He doesn't know anything about American history.
No, and if I was the news director there, I'd sit him down and I'd go, look, what's going on here? Now, do you really believe the Klan is not Democrats, but leftists? That they were progressives, as you said.
That's the Glenn Beck school of thought.
Right. Well, okay, then you can't come on here anymore, not because I'm against conservatives, because you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That is wildly incorrect, counterfactual, apparently you're an idiot, and I can't have an idiot on my air.
Or you need medication, and I want what's best for you.
You want to make a case for Donald Trump that he's going to build a wall and we need a wall? No problem. You need, hey, Muslims are dangerous. I think that is deeply problematic, but that's an opinion you have, right?
Yeah.
I understand that too. But if you say to me, I'm going to distort facts on a regular basis on your air and lie, either on purpose or I'm so stupid that I don't know anything about history or politics, then why would I have you on as an analyst?